Okay, today we're going to talk about the only book I've ever thrown, 1984. It's one of those books that no one really wants to read, but they think they should. And it's incredibly painful, so when you're actually done reading it, then you don't want to ever read it again. And I read it the first time without doing any prep work, like I tell people to do, didn't have those skills then. So I didn't know what was going to happen, and I kind of anticipated it, and then it gets to the climax of the book, I'm like, oh, that's it. Anyway, but I had to reread it again to lead a book discussion on it just recently, and it really was an incredibly good discussion. And if you watch the author review on George Orwell, who's really Eric Blair, because he was a democratic socialist, and he said that everything he wrote was against totalitarianism and in favor of democratic socialism, and yet when you read 1984, even like Animal Farm, it doesn't seem like, I think, especially like as Americans, or we live in these free democratic societies, we don't realize, he actually didn't like our form exactly like it is. He wanted us to move towards socialism, which is odd because it doesn't seem like that's what he's saying in his books. So that's something to think about and discuss. And the author review gets into that a little bit more, but so it's a fictional scenario of a totalitarian government, just like a communist regime type of thing, and it's set in the year 1984. He wrote it in the 40s, right after World War II, and what he's saying is, you know, what happens when the government is completely in charge, and in this scenario, they can't like read your thoughts per se, but they have cameras in your apartment, and they basically watch every single thing that you do, and you have all these required things you have to do every day, and they're basically really completely in control of your whole life. But early on in the book, Winston is the main character, and he makes this comment. He's talking to himself. Nothing was your own except the few cubic centimeters inside your skull. So he realizes early on that all that's really his is his own choices and his own thoughts. And it's really fascinating from that perspective, because really I think one of the core themes that's discussed throughout the book is this idea of, well, is there anything that's really true? And do the people that are in power know better? And can you say that there's such a thing as conscience and you're acting against it or not? And that's what Winston's trying to find out is, does anybody think the way he does? And does anybody else feel violated and think that the situation is wrong? And they have these 3 slogans of the party. And in this discussion, this is going to be a recommendation of mine for discussing this book, and that is that we had an incredible time going through these 3: war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, and identifying not only how and in what way that was true, because on the surface they just seem like that's retarded. How would people ever buy into that? But what we did was, and you'll find this out in the book, there's different levels of individuals in this society. I mean, it's supposed to do away with classes, but of course there's still classes. So there's the proles, who are like the proletariat, the lower class. Then there's the kind of the lower outside party members, and then there's the inside party members that run everything and know all the ins and outs of everything that's going on. And so we looked at how are those slogans true at each level of government, at each level of society. And as you read through the book, I think by the time you're done, you'll know what I mean. And you can look at, after he gets the book and he reads the book about why things are the way that they are, then you understand kind of how the inner party thinks and how they work and why. And then you have Winston, who's outer party, and then you have the proles. And you kind of make conjectures. We came up with some really interesting things. And we thought of this 4th one that should have been a party slogan, and that is, life is death. And that's really an interesting idea to think about. Now, there's also, he gets this book from this guy he thinks is going to help him, who ends up torturing him. And there's this really fascinating comment that he makes when he's reading the book. He says this: the best books he perceived are those that tell you what you know already. Of course, I'm all about books, so I thought that was really fascinating. And in what sense is that true? How is it that the books we love the most tell us what we already know? What does that really mean? So, one little warning, caveat here for this book, and that is the issue of intercourse. It comes up, and then it comes up some more. So it's really best if the student is high school age, really mentor it, read it before them, and then just know going into it, there's not going to be anything like inappropriate from the standpoint of like describing inappropriate behavior, but they touch and you're clear and you know what they do. And it's interesting because it's not about the act, it's about the psychology of the act. It's about what do you do in a society where real romantic love and marriage for romantic reasons is totally unavailable. It's totally shut off from you. What do you do? And Winston struggles with this and tries to figure out how to deal with it. He married, it was horrible, she left him, all these kinds of things. And so it wasn't as horrible to discuss this time around as I thought it might be, and we touched on it and then we moved on. And I can see why Orwell included it for some of those psychological reasons. He certainly didn't need to dwell on it to the level that he did. It's raw. The language is raw. Not raw in the way that some other books that I feel like are much poorer quality writing, like Hunger Games or something. I don't mean that. I don't mean raw like it's not really good writing, but raw like really wants to make you feel a certain way. He wants to make you feel indignant and frustrated and angry and disturbed. He wants you to have a very strong emotional reaction to this book because he wants you to do something about it. And that's why good doesn't win. So I do think it is worth reading and discussing. I think you've got to gear up for it a little bit and plan for it. And then I think that once you get through the book and then you have a discussion, you'll really find that can be a good book to discuss. Again, be careful at a high school age level and use your own wisdom and discernment there. But anyway, that's 1984. See you next time.